So today we're looking at Gabriele Munter. This painting is by her and it is called Breakfast of the Birds, and it was painted in 1934. It's actually one of my favourite paintings. We can assume from this, um, obviously it's a woman, we're pretty sure it's a woman, and we're pretty sure it's actually a Gabriele Munter. So she's looking out at the garden, and it's a seemingly very quite a simple painting, a woman with breakfast on the table looking out at the birds. But there's so much more going on in this. So the thing that strikes me is, first of all, we have her with her back to us. And what that does is it gives us a sense of intrusion, as if we are intruding in on the scene. Now we need to put this in its context. Gabriele Munter, born 1877, died 1962. She had a very long life. Was a German expressionist, and she lived with and studied with Kandinsky. And Kandinsky was a founding member of the Blue Reiter group, the Blue Rider group. And the reason I wanted to show this painting is because there's a fantastic exhibition at the moment, which is of the Blue Rider group. So I'll put details of that at the end. So basically, Gabriele Munter came from a fairly wealthy family in Berlin. She was brought up in Berlin, and she was totally supported in becoming an artist, which is quite unusual. Many of them weren't. She had a private tutor growing up, and she trained in the studio of the artist Ernst Bosch, and then at the women's school with Willy Spatz. Her parents died when she was 21, so she was living at home. And then she decided to go to America with her sister to visit her extended family. And they stayed there for more than 2 years, mainly in, I think it was Texas and Missouri, I think. And these sketchbooks from that period do survive. So you can look at them online, and there's some work from those in the exhibition as well. She was very wealthy when her parents died, so she had a very unrestricted, fabulous life with no convention. She did what she wanted. She had a very wonderful life. And she was quite a strong woman for those days, because to be able to hold your own as an artist when all around you were these really strong male characters coming up with these movements and being quite macho about the whole thing. But she stood her ground, and she became involved with Kandinsky on a professional level, that then turned into a personal relationship. Um, and she was basically very very influenced by him, but she also influenced him. She talked about painting in a rather wonderful way. One of the quotes of hers is, which I've got written here: "When I begin to paint, it's like leaping suddenly into deep waters, and I never know beforehand whether I will be able to swim. Well, it was Kandinsky who taught me the technique of swimming. I mean that he has taught me to work fast enough and with enough self-assurance to be able to achieve this kind of rapid and spontaneous recording of life." I think that's rather wonderful. She went from strength to strength. Her work was just fantastic and so bold. Um, and she, on her 80th birthday, she gave her entire collection, which was something like between 80 and 100 oil paintings and several hundred drawings, to the Stadtisch Gallery in Munich, and that was in about 1955 or something. Anyway, so she's one of my favorite artists, and so I want to talk about this painting because it's one of my favorite paintings. So, as I said initially, we have a woman looking out of the window. It all seems fairly as it is, and then you start to look a bit closer. So notice, first of all, there is the division between the windows just above her head. which sort of divides the whole painting. It's very, it's what we would call bad composition, but it seems to me quite intentional here. It's almost like, and she's slightly shifting her head to the right as if somehow that's causing her an issue. Also, she's seated with that right in front of her view. So it's almost like she's got this division in what she's looking at as well. On the left of the window, we have all of the birds. On the right, it's slightly more bleak. There's a sort of division by her in the table too. On the left, we have the jug and the milk and the plate, and on the right, we have some rather solid, slightly unattractive looking cakes or something. A lot of her work was outlined, which was very much de rigueur of the day, this idea of outlining things. But the other thing that strikes me is that we have snow outside on the branches, but we also have snow on the table. It feels like a very snowy table, like it's covered in snow, and that we're seeing the snow like you do in, when you go skiing and you have the lovely lights at the end of the day reflected in the snow. It's almost like an end of day snow on the mountains, but it's on her table. So yeah, so there seems like snow outside and snow inside. It's almost like she's outside and inside at the same time. We also have very heavy drapes, which feel quite almost oppressive, actually. They're quite weighted down, they feel very heavy. Um, and that colour's picked up in one of the bird's chests on the outside. So that gives us a connection between the outside and the inside. It's painted in a very, what I'd call a sculptural way. It's almost impasto. It almost has a real thickness of the applied paint of a lot of artists, like, sort of Auerbach, where you would sort of really see the texture of the paint. Um, there's a sort of isolation in it, obviously, because she's on her own, and we're looking at her, looking at the scene. There is some joy for me in the colours of the birds, but again, they're quite heavy. The only one that isn't is the one that's reflecting the interior. So from this, and I feel like that's the one she's looking at. And so to me, it feels like she is that bird and that bird is her. There's some strong connection there. There's an interesting placement of objects on the table. It's almost like the jug and the coffee pot are like a couple. And I'm wondering if that's her relationship with her Kandinsky. And on the other side, there's a sort of uncomfortable matching of the two items. They look very uncomfortable on the right. The cake pieces don't feel like they belong together at all. They just feel like two sort of solid lumps of something. They're not very appealing. Whereas the pot and the jug are quite elegant and quite poignant. But there's a third item on the left. So there's a jug and a coffee pot, but there's also an empty plate. So I wonder if there was, maybe reading a hell of a lot into this, but I'm wondering whether there was some other person in that relationship or something that was intruding upon their relationship. And then on the other side, we have the uncomfortable pieces of cake. So it's almost like two parts of the relationship that she has, maybe with Kandinsky. And probably if she was alive today, she would say to me, "My God, Cleo, this is nothing to do with that." But I'm reading what I feel I can see in it, and you can read what you like. I find it fascinating that that window that's closed because it's cold outside is such a dominant part of the painting. And in composition, we try and avoid having vertical lines or horizontal lines which slice the painting in half. And yet she's positioned herself exactly in the center where those pieces of bad composition are. I feel like it's an uncomfortable picture. Initially, it felt quite, charming and lovely, but there isn't a lot of comfort in this. We're made to be very aware of the snow outside, and we're then given the snow again on the tablecloth. The tablecloth doesn't look smooth to me. It feels like snow. Nothing is very smooth and elegant. Um, I don't know why, but it feels like, I mean, this was done in 34 and she was born in 87. So what would she be there? 30, 47 or something. So yes, so I've maybe it's difficult time of her life. I don't know. Maybe something's quite difficult for her. It's almost like there's quite a bit of grief in this. Um, and interesting, when I first looked at it, the first time I ever saw it was about 10 years ago. I thought, oh, what a beautiful painting. It's really sort of rather beautiful and pretty and joyful. But actually, the more you look at it, the less joy I can find. I do find peace in it. It feels peaceful. But a bit like with the Sanchez Cotin paintings, where the items were hung from string, and behind was the infinity, it feels to me like this is, a window onto another life, a window into a new way of living. There's something beyond that for her. It's contemplation. The colours are also really rather muted. Munter had a fantastic palette of colours, and she often went really, really bright and very strong, and yet this is quite muted. Um, there's a lot of tenderness about the way the tree is painted with the snow on. It's probably the most tender part of the whole painting. But she's rather nondescript. She's got a very sort of slightly boring blue top on, and her hair's got not much texture to it. There's so much more detail in the coffee pot and the jug than there is in anything else. And so that's why, for me, it feels like those might be very symbolic of her relationship with Kandinsky. I don't know enough about their relationship, but it's making me want to look into it to find out what could have been going on. Also, the curtains for me have a sort of like a fleshy anatomical feel about them. They're sort of almost like the sort of muscular. They're quite muscular, and also the wall feels almost like flesh at the back. So, is she looking at that bird? Is she looking at the table? Is she eating? Is she reading a book? We don't know. But because her head's slightly tilted, I like to think of it that she is looking at the bird with the dark pink chest in the background. The one, no, not in the background, sorry, the one on the right side. Um, and there is some hope in this, I suppose, with the sky. It's rather beautiful. It's a rather beautiful colour, sort of like a cerulean and cobalt or cyan. So there you are. Breakfast of Birds, fantastic painting, 1934, Gabriele Munter. And if you can, go and see the Blue Rider exhibition, which is the Expressionist Kandinsky, Munter, and the Blue Rider, which is at the Tate. And it's on for a few months, I believe. So I would definitely go and see that if you can. Anyway, there you are. Breakfast of Birds, 1934, Gabriele Munter.